ನಮಸ್ಸರ್ವೇಭ್ಯ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಕೂಡ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. A warm welcome to all of you for the 117th Foundation Day of Mythic Society. I will give you a brief introduction to Mythic Society. In 1909, some of the British servants who were here in Bangalore, especially Colonel Richard, who was the Commissioner of Cantonment Area, and he and other our Bharatiya servants like Krishna Swami Iyengar and then Venkatanaranappa, all these things, these people came together and they wanted to do exclusively study of Bharatiya culture and particularly about the Mysore kingdom and its culture and all these aspects. So they thought of forming a society, and that is how on May 1909, on 9th May 1909, Mythic Society was founded. And the first same year, in March 1909, Indian Institute of Science was also founded. And the first director of Indian Institute of Science, Maurice Travers, was also the first president of Mythic Society. Because at that time, the idea was that both science and spirituality should go together. And the original idea of Mythic Society was to study about our spirituality, folklore, history, and also cultural aspects of Mysore kingdom in particular, and also about Bharatiya culture in our country. So we have traveled more than 116 years. Now this is the 117th year. A large number of scholars associated with archaeology as well as history and other allied subjects, they were all associated with Mythic Society. And some of the names I will just read out, and some of the people were, as already said, the photographs you can see in our heritage hall, you can see all the photographs. We had Krishna Swami Iyengar, one of the renowned historians, and many of the famous archaeologists, and also John Marshall, who excavated Harappan site. John Marshall, after excavating Takshashila, presented his paper here, and also it was published in our quarterly journal of Mythic Society. So during this 117 years, we had taken lot of research work, both history and as well as connected with archaeology. And also recently we had a megalithic excavation at Doddalathur, and Professor Shobha Madam also is here, who was instrumental for that one. And also we have taken up work about our conservation of inscriptions, stone inscriptions, and all of us know due to wear and tear, many of them will get erased and we will not able to read them properly or assess them properly. So conservation also has to be done. For all these things, we had set a new research work on that one. And Shri Uday Kumar, who is an expert in these fields, for the past 4 years he is continuously working. And we have got a special camera also, so that if the letters have erased due to weathering on the inscriptions, the camera picks up the chisel mark, so that we can read what was the exact letter at that time. So rereading of the inscription also can be taken. Similarly, Mythic Society has taken up a work at the Oriental Research Institute in Mysore, which is famous for manuscripts. And we are able to conserve more than 35,000 bundles of manuscripts, which contains 26 lakhs leaves. And all the 26 lakhs leaves have been digitized now, and they are ready for our examination and other things. So like this, many projects Mythic Society has taken up, and today is the 117th birthday of Mythic Society. I once again welcome you all. And we were thinking who should be our lecturer, who should deliver the lecture on this 117th anniversary of Mythic Society. So he should be an eminent scholar, and the eminent scholars we have got here, a scholar we have got here. Professor Vasant Shinde is a renowned archaeologist and a museum expert. And he was the Vice-Chancellor Professor and also Vice-Chancellor of the Deccan College Postgraduate Research Institute at Pune. And he was the Director General of the National Maritime Heritage Complex and Museum, Adjunct Professor at IIT BHU. And also he was a Bhatnagar Fellow at the CCMB. And one of his monumental work is regarding the genome research he did regarding Rakhighari excavation and also the craniofacial analysis of the Rakhighari skeletons. And he has lectured in many universities. In Cambridge University and many countries, and all these areas he has been very much acknowledged as a great scholar. And Professor Shinde has been teaching postgraduate archaeology since 1982 and has supervised more than 55 ME and PH and MPhil students, and he has got 40 PhD students to his this thing. His publications includes 14 books, 2 monographs, 19 edited volumes, and 136 national papers, 77 international research papers. And not only that, he has delivered more than 450 lectures in national and international institutions. And one of the recent work he has done is, he has established the Society of South Asian Archaeology and developed the Urban Knowledge Center at Rakhighari, reflecting his deep commitment to public archaeology and cultural heritage conservation. We are happy to have Professor Shinde here, and I request Professor Shinde to deliver his lecture.
Namaste. Respected Sri Nagarajji, the Vice President of Mythic Society, Professor Padigar, Professor Shobha, my student, and the other delegates. So friends, first I would like to I would like to give my greetings on the occasion of the 117th, the Foundation Day of the Mythic Society. And all of you know the role that is played by this Mythic Society in the awareness and the preservation, conservation of the Indian heritage and the Indian culture. So we always wish, in fact, we should have, maybe more like, Sri Nagarajji, we should have more Nagarajji, in fact, in the country, so that, we can take more, in fact, maybe care of the, cultural heritage of this great country. And unfortunately, we have such a large maybe heritage. In fact, in each new corner of the country, we have the cultural heritage. And we are not really able to take the proper maybe preservation and the care of the heritage of the country. And I always believe that, if there is a participation of the maybe local people, participation of the people in the preservation and the heritage of the country, I think we will be able to manage our heritage well. But for that, we had to create awareness among the people, and that awareness, has to be done, in fact, on a very loud scale. And I hope that that some of my maybe students and the colleagues will carry forward this particular tradition. So today I am going to speak about the Bharatiya knowledge system. I think a lot of you are hearing about this particular word, Indian knowledge system, Bharatiya knowledge system. Fortunately or unfortunately, the Minister of Culture, Minister of Education, they have adopted on the Indian knowledge system. In fact, when there was a discussion, I was suggesting to them that it should be called as the Bharatiya knowledge system, because what we are talking today about our traditional knowledge system is basically, it is very age old. And India was, this particular maybe name was made more popular by the Britishers. So before that, this country was known as the Bharat, Great Bharat. So I always talk about the Bharatiya knowledge system. And I'll be presenting, in fact, the actual evidence, the data that we have recovered from different archaeological sites. And with the help of this archaeological data, I'm going to speak about, what is the origin of the Indian knowledge system, how it has developed, and how it has continued till today. And I always believe that the traditional knowledge system goes back to the Harappan times. And I always consider that the Harappans are the pioneers, in fact. They are the founders of the Indian culture and tradition. All of us today are following more or less the same custom, the same tradition, and the same knowledge system that was introduced 5,000 years ago by the Harappans. So it is very important that we need to understand what are the roots of our knowledge system and how it has progressed over the years. That is very important. Can I have the next one? Okay. So I just want to start with this particular photograph. I was excavating a site called Karsola in Haryana. This is in 2012. And we had a very distinguished visitor in the form of former Prime Minister's daughter, Professor Upinder Singh. She was a professor of history in Delhi University. So she came, with the students, and being a daughter of Prime Minister, there were, security officers and the, other IAS officers with her. And I was showing to her the remains that we excavated from the site. And in the background, these people were murmuring, some of the officials, that why all this, these people have come all the way from Pune to this small village in Haryana. And somebody said that maybe there is a wealth buried here. So they want to take out the wealth. They want to take the treasure from here. Somebody said that, what a wealth, waste of the national wealth. Because what is the use of this kind of research, this kind of exercise? And there was one very interesting comment. Somebody said that, maybe these people did not get an opportunity to play in the dust when they were children. They're playing now. So this is the kind of understanding, because we always consider these IAS as the cream of the society. And if this is the understanding, in fact, among the cream of the society, then you can imagine what will be the status of the general society in the country. So I always believe that we have to create awareness, and we have to tell the importance of the heritage studies. And we need to understand our roots, what are our roots, and how we have come to this particular status. So that is very important. And fortunately in India, in fact, we are continuing the same tradition for last more than 5,000 years. I think India is one of the few countries, maybe China to some extent, which has got such a long tradition, in fact, long continuity. And that is very important. That is the asset of the country, in fact. So if you understand the roots of our country and how we have come to this particular stage, then perhaps it will be easy for us to understand how with the help of the heritage and culture, how we have managed to survive for such a long period. I think that this country was invaded by many foreigners. But in spite of that, because our roots are so strong, we have survived. And we'll be surviving for thousands of years. There is no doubt about that. So I think we have to really make awareness about these studies that we are doing. And I also believe that if I don't know maybe mathematics or maybe chemistry, perhaps that is not going to make much difference to me. But if I don't know my roots, my heritage, perhaps that is going to make a lot of difference. So it is really important that everybody should really understand what is our heritage, and perhaps we should make some efforts in fact in preserving and protecting our heritage also. So India had a very very rich knowledge system, and the beginning of that is going back to almost 7,000 BCE. That is 9,000 years ago. This particular tradition was introduced. And over the period, we can see the gradual growth of this particular tradition, the transformation of the technologies. And because of this rich heritage, rich system that we had, India was always a very prosperous country in the past. Now, of course, we are regaining now. But we know that every foreigners, in fact, they wanted to come to India because they knew that India is very rich, in fact. So because of that, a lot of foreigners have attacked, they have invaded this country, and they have looted, in fact, our country, economically, and also they have demeaned, in fact, our cultural heritage in this particular country. As I said, that the tradition goes back to the Harappan times. We have two kinds of evidence. When we talk about the Indian law system, I think we talk about Indian law system based on the textual sources and also based on the archaeological sources. So today I'm going to speak about the archaeological sources that we have discovered, excavated from different archaeological sites. So this is the timeline. In fact, this is giving you some idea about when it originated and how it has evolved from the beginning of the settled life going back to 7000 BCE, and how from time to time, there is a proper transformation, in fact, in the technology and the heritage of the country. It begins with this particular site, a very iconic, very important site in the Indian subcontinent. This is a site called Mehergarh, which is in the Bolan Pass. I think, most of the foreign influences, even foreign, invaders came through the Bolan Pass. And the earliest evidence that we have for the settled life is found at this particular site, the Mehergarh. Not only the importance of Mehergarh is not that, it has produced the earliest evidence of settled life, but at this particular site, the scholars have studied the transformation of the technology, the transformation of the culture, and how that transformation has resulted into the formation of the Harappan culture, Harappan tradition, and the urban civilization at some stage. So from that point of view, this site is very, very important. And these are the crafts that we find in the earliest levels at the site of Mehergarh. Most of the basic crafts were produced at the site, and the people have developed the basic technology for producing these crafts which are required for the society. So this is how the beginning of the traditional law system goes back. And then, of course, during the Harappan times, after 7000 BCE, now the beginning of the Harappan culture is around 6000 BCE. The new research that we have done, in fact, in the Saraswati region, the Archaeological Survey of India has excavated a very important site called Virana. And then, of course, I excavated sites like Farmana, Mitatal, Girawad, Rakigadi. So these sites have produced, series of dates. Now, when the site, let me tell you the mindset of the, Westerners. When the site of Virana was excavated by the Indian scholars, and when he started giving the early dates, 6000 BC for the beginning of the Harappan culture, nobody accepted these dates, particularly the Western scholars. So when I say Western scholars, means the Europeans and the American scholars. So they say that there were a number of comments. My friend, Mark Canary also, made some comments. He said that maybe, Indians are not good, in fact, in the excavation techniques. They don't know how to excavate the site. And he said that the samples that were collected from Virana, they were all contaminated. So we cannot accept the date. Now, these similar kind of, doubts were not raised when the site of, this Mehergarh was excavated. Because Mehergarh was excavated by the French scholar. And when they found the early dates, immediately the whole world accepted those dates because it was done by the Westerners. And they always think that the Westerners always are right, in fact, in their own belief. So what we did, we did not, brush that aside, the comments made by the scholars. We accepted the challenge. And after Virana, in fact, particularly I excavated 4 more sites in that region. And all the sites have produced the early dates, maybe 5500, 6000 BCE, for the beginning of the Harappan culture. So now we know that the antiquity of the Harappan culture is going back to almost 6000 BCE, and that is evolved from the Neolithic phase found at the site of maybe at Mehergarh, maybe and other sites also. So early Harappan phase is very important, in fact, in the Indian subcontinent because most of the basic knowledge system was develop and evolve in this particular phase. So we have studied this particular phase in great detail. Now this is a map, where the Harappan culture flourished mostly between these two rivers, Indus and Saraswati. Between these two rivers, the culture has flourished. And also, the main concentration of the Harappan culture was in the Saraswati basin. Now, Saraswati river has been properly identified based on the textual sources and as well as the scientific research that is done by archaeologists and the historians and also the ISRO scientists. So they have mapped the entire course of the river Saraswati and they have reconstructed the entire course of river Saraswati. And when we study the distribution of the Harappan settlements, we find that nearly 2/3 of the Harappan settlements are located in the Saraswati basin itself. Today, of course, the river is dry, the course is dry. But on the dry course, we find series of number of archaeological sites. So we know that this was a very, very important region for the Harappans. So we have studied some of the sites, we have excavated some of the sites from this region. So what is the scenario impact in the early Harappan phase? In the early Harappan phase, we find number of series of regional cultures. And these are some of the regional cultures which have been identified by the scholars. And this identification is done based on the ceramic tradition that we find. Each culture has a very distinct ceramic tradition, painted ceramic tradition, and that varies from culture to culture. Maybe the surface of the color varies, the shape of the pots, the pottery, the designs found on them, this vary from culture to culture, and based on that, this number of different early Harappan cultures, regional cultures have been identified. And then, of course, I studied a proper development from early Harappan to the mature Harappan phase. Now, mature Harappan is the most prosperous phase of the Harappan culture. And that phase flourished from 2600 BCE to 1900 BCE. Now, that phase is considered to be the phase of the civilization. We call this as the phase of the Harappan civilization. And in this particular phase, we see the complete transformation of the technology, and most of the technology were matured. They were completely advanced in this particular stage. So that particular development, transformation was properly understood at Farmana and also at Rakhigarhi. At both the sites, we have the early Harappan phase and the mature Harappan phase. And we have studied in fact how the transformation in the material culture has taken place from the beginning till the origin of the Harappan civilization phase. For example, when we talk about the Harappan maybe town planning, now we know that that town planning has not come suddenly. Some of the scholars earlier said that that the town planning is brilliant and it has burst suddenly in fact in the Indian subcontinent. That is not the case. Now we have a long precedence of the town planning, and there is a gradual transformation as far as the architectural tradition is concerned. So the Harappans began to live in these type of circular structures. These are some of the structures found in the lowermost levels at the site of Farmana, Birana, and Rakhigarhi also. So this is how the beginning, in fact, is, the beginning is very modest of the Harappan culture. So this is the kind of evidence we find in the earliest levels, dated to around 6000 BCE. In the next phase, in the earlier phase, the people made pits and lived inside the pits. We call them as pit dwellings. And there were clusters, in fact, in each, maybe cluster, we find 3 or 4 huts. And the function of hut was different. But one hut was used for sleeping purpose, one as a kitchen, one as a storage. So that kind of clusters we find in the lowermost levels, that is the pit dwelling level. In the next levels, they continue the same tradition, but now they have started building houses on top of the ground. So one of the remains of circular structure that we have excavated, you can see what is the nature of the structure that is found in the next phase, maybe around 5500 BCE. Around 5000 BCE, then we find the typical Harappan tradition, in fact. They started producing the Harappan bricks. They started producing the Harappan bricks in a proper ratio, 1:2:3 and 1:2:4. And they started constructing rectangular and square structures in this particular phase. And now we can see that even the concept of the bathroom was introduced in this particular phase. The concept of tandoor chicken. By the way, chicken tandoor is the tradition or the delicacy introduced by the Harappans, and it's so popular in fact in the Indian subcontinent. So we find this type of the elements which were emerged in fact in this particular phase. So now we find the typical Harappan tradition happening from this particular phase. This is dated to around 5000 BCE. And then, of course, we find complete transformation in fact in the next stage, in the maybe around 2600 BCE. In the next stage, we find the full-fledged town planning coming into existence. So this is how the gradual growth of the Harappan architecture has happened, and we have a proper evidence from number of archaeological sites. So based on that, now we know that how the Harappans are transformed from a modest beginning to urban phase in the Indian subcontinent. And this is considered with the contribution made by the Indians to the history of science and technology in fact in the world. So we have taught in fact the world how to make beautiful, very clean and hygienic cities. Nobody else in fact has developed this type of tradition. Even though the urbanization happened in fact in Mesopotamia and Egypt, the urbanization was concentrated around the royal families only. They never cared for the common people, whereas the Harappans cared for the common people. Whatever development they did, that was for the welfare of the common people. That is very important. So our mindset was right from the early stage. This was our mindset. And then, of course, these are the elements they introduce in the architectural, in the architecture. These are the architectural elements. We know what kind of, maybe door frames they had, what kind of window frame, they had developed that time. And that this particular tradition continues even today without much change, in fact, in the Indian subcontinent. So this is how the continuity is found. One of the most important contribution that we made to the history of architecture is that we have taught the world again to build, to undertake scientific construction method. Now this scientific construction method today is called English-born construction method, and that is being followed all over the world. The brick wall, when we construct the brick wall, one line of the brick is placed horizontal, next line above that may be vertical. So that kind of alternative construction of brick line, that is called the English-born construction method. But that this particular tradition was introduced 5000 years ago by the Harappans. English people were not aware about this tradition till 14th century. But still it is called English-born because they claim that they have introduced this particular tradition in the Indian subcontinent. But this is actually the tradition that was introduced by the Indians. If you look at the settlement pattern of the Harappans, particularly the town planning of the Harappans, and the modern town planning, there is hardly any change. If you can superimpose the Harappan town planning on this modern town planning, you will see the continuity. In fact, there is so much continuity, particularly in the northwest part of the Indian subcontinent and to the in the northern part of the Indian subcontinent. So we have not really forgotten our tradition for such a long period. How the Harappans were able to undertake such a systematic construction method? They have used this type of measuring instruments. This is the earliest, by the way, this is the earliest evidence of measuring instruments anywhere in the world. And even though we cannot understand, because we have not been able to understand or decipher the Harappan script, we don't know what was the progress that made in the various spheres of science and technology. But from this evidence, we can presume that the Harappans knew mathematics very well. And because of that, they were able to develop this type of measuring system in the Indian subcontinent. And then, of course, subsequently, this measuring system was adopted by the world at some stage. So this is the evidence from different archaeological sites of the measurements. The other important knowledge system that was introduced by the Harappans is the construction of the wells. They brought the drinking, very clean and drinking water very close to the society, to the settlement. And this is how the earliest evidence of the constructed wells is found in the Indian subcontinent. Again, the earliest evidence of its kind in the world. And some of the wells, particularly at Banavali, the Harappan well is being used even today. The modern people are using the same, 5,000 years old well. And even at Dholavira, if you visit Dholavira sometimes, maybe you'll find that there's a beautiful Harappan well made of stone. And that well is being used even today by the local people. So again, you can see that how much we connect, in fact, to the past and how much we care for our roots, in fact. You will think that this is maybe the broken modern bathroom, but this is actually the bathroom, the remains of the bathroom excavated by Professor B.B. Lal at the site of at the site of Kalibanga. Not only that, the Harappans have introduced the toilet system and the bathroom system. Again, the earliest in the world to introduce this particular system. But they also in the bathroom they have introduced the waterproof tiles and decorative tiles. And the modern tiles, the concept of the modern tile is derived, in fact, from this particular concept. So we take pride, in fact, in this particular tradition and the knowledge system that we have introduced. This is the earliest evidence of the toilet. We always thought that the commode system has come from the West. But this is the earliest evidence of commode system found anywhere in the world. So probably the Europeans or the others, they have borrowed this particular commode system from us. So this is the toilet that was excavated at the site of Harappa, and you can see that there's a proper commode, and also there's a proper drainage outlet, and there's a big pot, and there's small lota in that. So even today we follow the same tradition. In the villages, particularly in the toilet, we keep a bucket and a mug in that. So that tradition continues from the Harappan times. The unique system that the Harappans developed was the drainage pattern. Some of the foreign scholars have written that this is considered to be one of the wonders of ancient world. How the Harappans were ahead of the time, and how they could think about this type of system that is needed for the society. So they develop very systematically the drainage pattern inside the settlement. So as I mentioned that each and every household had this toilet and the bathroom system, and they have got two different systems, the drainage system for these. The closed drainage system was attached to the toilet, and the open drainage was attached to the bathroom system. And then they had the network of the drainage inside the settlement, and that was connected to each other and ultimately joined to the main drainage line. And that main drainage line, this is part of the main drainage line excavated at Harappa. So that main drainage line was taken outside the city wall and emptied somewhere, making sure that all the cities are very clean and hygienic. No dirty water spreads within the settlement. So that system was developed by the Harappans. Today, in fact, we more or less we follow the same system, but we don't care about the proper drainage system. And what the Harappans did, in fact, they followed a very simple gradient pattern. The water flew from the higher levels to the lower levels. That is how the system was developed. And subsequently, if you study the subsequent water management system in the country, right up to the medieval time, then you will see that they have followed the same model, same system, over the period. Not only that, they have not only kept the cities clean, but they also have a proper garbage management system. These are what you are seeing, in fact, here. These are some of the garbage pits which were located along the main streets at Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. And you can see different kinds, in fact. These are some of the decorative dustbins that they had excavated, they had constructed. So they had a proper drainage system. They had the proper maybe garbage management system. This was our tradition. We have forgotten. And today the government has to announce the schemes like Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. But this was in fact in our blood. And this tradition is very, very important. As I mentioned that today we follow more or less same system. Where I used to excavate at Rakhigarhi, and whenever I used to get time in the evening and go in the village, I used to get the feel that I'm moving the Harappan village. Exactly the same, dimension of the roads are exactly same. The nature of the roads are exactly same. even the houses, the traditional houses in Haryana and Punjab, they are based on the Harappan plan. They are open, in fact, in the middle, big courtyard in the middle, and rooms on all sides. It's very scientific, in fact, because of this system, they get proper ventilation, and also, this light and, the sunlight, etc. So that was the system that they had developed. But, as I said, that we have forgotten, we don't, learn from the history. And some of the drainage pattern in the, maybe village of Rakhigali is open in the street. This was never the case, in fact, with the Harappans. They always cared for the hygiene of the people. And the Harappans were so healthy. In fact, I excavated the site of Farmana in one of the largest cemetery at Farmana, Harappan cemetery. And we were studying the pathology during the Harappan times. And some of the Korean scientists were working with us. And at the end of the study, the Koreans were so disappointed because they were not able to detect a major disease in the Harappan people. They were so healthy. And the Harappans were healthy because of the system they had adopted. There is a lot to learn from the Harappan trade mechanism. I always give the example of the Harappans when I talk about Japan, in fact. Because Japan was completely destroyed during the Second World War. In fact, I visited Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and I could visualize how much destruction was wrought, in fact, during the Second World War. And nobody in the world thought that Japan will rise again. But Japan rose within 15 years. In 1950, they were almost completely flat. And 1964-65, during the Olympics, they demonstrated the kind of economic development that they did. And the mechanism that the Harappans did, or the same mechanism the Japanese adopted. The Harappans did not have a lot of natural resources available within the Harappan region. They were located all outside the Harappan region, controlled by the local Chalcolithic, Neolithic people. So Harappans developed very good coordinated relation with these people, contemporary people. And then they started getting raw materials from them, maybe continuous flow of the raw material. And they had the technology with them. So they started processing these raw materials in their workshops. And the finished goods that they produced were supplied to the same communities from whom they acquired the raw material. That is how the Japanese or the Harappans started developing their economic strength. And then at later stage, they realized they need to go beyond Indian subcontinent. And then, of course, they developed the maritime trade contacts. But this is how these Harappans could flourish, in spite of the fact that they did not have sufficient, maybe natural resources. They were able to develop the urbanization by adopting different strategy, trade strategy. And they have taught the world, in fact, what is the importance of trade. Why today Trump and the whole world is fighting over the trade, because they know the importance of the trade. And that importance was taught to the world by the Indians. So the revenue that they were able to generate through the hinterland trade, because they started developing the hinterland trade, that was not really enough. They were, maybe slightly the economic condition was getting better, but not enough, in fact, to develop the urbanization. So the Harappans were the first, in fact, to venture out of the Indian subcontinent. And they established contact with Oman first. There is a site called Ras Al Jin in Oman, in the northern tip of Oman. So that site has produced, I was a part of the excavation there, in fact, in 90s. So we find a lot of Harappan objects there. The Harappan objects, the Mesopotamian objects, Egyptian objects there. So that was hub, in fact. So Harappans used to sail from Lothal directly to Ras Al Jin, and they used to carry the goods from here. So the Harappans developed this maritime trade. They had realized the importance of trade, and they had expanded beyond the Indian subcontinent. And through the trade, they were able to generate so much wealth. That wealth was used by the Harappans for the welfare of the common people, for constructing beautiful cities, very clean and hygienic cities for the common people. So that was the kind of strategy the Japan adopted also. Japan did not have natural resources with them. So they started importing raw materials from India, China, the developing countries. And then they started processing these raw materials, in their maybe factories, and this, produced, large amount of goods, finished goods, which were supplied to the same countries from whom they acquired the raw material. That is how Japan could, achieve so much economic, achievement. So this is very important that, we learn something from our history, and this is one of the classical examples, how we can learn from our history. So the Harappans, since they decided to develop the maritime trade, they also, decided to develop some maybe facilities, infrastructure for the maritime trade. And this particular one, in fact, the basin-like structure that you see here at the site of Lothal. Now, this is the earliest man-made dockyard anywhere in the world. So this had two purposes. One is that this was used as a port, and second, this was also used as a dockyard, dry dock. It has got, maybe inlet through which the water was coming, because the Lothal is on the river bank. So during the high tidal period, the seawater used to come up to the site, up to Lothal. So that time the ships used to ply. They used to come to site of Lothal, and they had an inlet. In fact, through the inlet, the water was coming inside the dockyard. And there is a small locking device, outlet. So whenever they wanted to use this as a dockyard, dry dock, they will close the inlet, and through the outlet, they will remove the water and turn this into a dry dock. And there they used to undertake construction of ships, and the maintenance of the ships. The earliest evidence anywhere, in fact, in the world. When I was a student, I always thought that this particular technique was adopted by the Indians from the Romans, because Romans were supposed to be advanced. But actually, we had developed this particular tradition 2,000 years before the Romans. So probably, the Romans have adopted this tradition from us, and then they started developing this particular tradition. So kind of ships that Harappans built, particularly two kinds of ships. In the upper, in fact, in the left-hand side, in the upper part, you can see a wooden ship with a flat bottom. And in the lower one is what we call as the reed boat, or the reed ship, made from thick grass. And both were capable of, traveling a bit deep sea, because inside these ships, you can see a cabin, in both these. So when you are traveling long distance, you need a cabin. And in the upper one, there are two birds also. They're called dishakak. So you need, because they did not have advanced navigation system with them, they have used the birds, in fact, for the navigation purpose. Because when you are close to the land, these birds can look at the land. They can fly to the land immediately. So the sailor will realize that, that they are close to the land. So this type of system was adopted by the Harappans, and this type of ships were developed by the Harappans. So again, they were pioneer, rather we were pioneer, in fact, in this particular tradition knowledge system. A classical example of a water harvesting and water management. I think I will suggest that if you can visit the site of Dholavira in Kutch part of Gujarat. There's so much to learn. In fact, I run one course, in fact, in IIT Hyderabad on the traditional, architectural system of the country. And always, I used to take the students from IIT to show this particular site. There is so much to learn, in fact. The planners can learn so much from this particular site. Because this site was developed in the desert part. Kutch was a very, desert, barren land completely. And during the Harappan times also, it was barren, and even today it is completely barren. So we were wondering why the Harappans have constructed such a flourishing city in the desert part. Perhaps this was the most iconic city of the Harappans, much more iconic than Harappa and Mohenjo-daro in terms of the architectural remains, not in terms of size. Of course, in terms of size, Rakhigarh is the biggest one, followed by Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, and then Dholavira. But in terms of architectural elements, evidence, this is the most important site of the Harappan civilization. So how come that the Harappans have developed in a desert part such a flourishing city? What the Harappans have done, in fact, they have developed or innovated a unique water harvesting system. Before establishing the city, They study the geography and geology of the region properly. And then they decided to establish this particular city between two rivers, Manhar and Mansar. These are the two rivers, very small rivers. So they established this particular city between these two rivers. And then they put series of dams on both the rivers, check dams. We have the actual evidence of the check dams even today. Because after the site was deserted, it was never reoccupied by subsequent period, in fact, or the people of the subsequent culture. So whatever remains are there, they all belong to the Harappans. So we have the actual evidence of the check dams here. And in the desert part, there is occasional rainfall. And whenever there is rainfall, these rivers get flash floods. During one of the rainy seasons, in fact, I took this particular photograph. So what the Harappans did, in fact, this flash water coming, or the flash flood water coming, that was arrested, through these check dams. And then entire water was, maybe they may have adopted, this type of system for, this arresting the water. And then, they diverted the entire water inside the settlement, water of both the rivers. In case the water comes in huge, volume, it might damage the city. So they had developed this particular, storm water drainage system, so that this system can take care of the excess water. There is no damage to the city. And then the remaining water, once the water subsides, then it will go to the different tanks they have constructed. And they have constructed a number of underground tanks. At least when the site was excavated, they have excavated nearly 12 tanks, and there may be many more. And these tanks were connected to each other by underground water channel system, so that the tanks keep on filling one after the other. So that system was adopted. So in the desert part, the Harappans created running water, and not only the Harappans were able to sustain, but they were constantly developing. In fact, at the site of Dholavira also, one can see transformation from the early Harappan to the mature Harappan phase. So that maybe process was happening simultaneously at this particular site also. So these are the tanks, underground tanks that they excavated. And some of the tanks are excavated in these solid rocks, maybe 5 meters to 6 meters. And we wonder how the Harappans have done that, because they did not have the iron or the steel chisels with them, or the implements, because you need to have iron or chisel, maybe steel implements for these. So what the Harappans must have done, that they must have removed the blocks. And to remove the blocks, they could make maybe grooves, very wide and deep grooves on the periphery of the rock. And they will pour water in that and keep some wooden pegs in that. So when wooden pegs, because of water, they will start swelling, that will crack the stone. So when the stone is cracked, they will remove the cracked stone, and then with the help of the bronze chisels, they can smoothen the surface. So you can see this one is made in the solid rock. But in spite of the limitations, maybe limitations on technology, the Harappans were able to achieve this sophistication during the Harappan times. These are the different tanks of different sizes. Even small tanks, there's a big well, in fact, perhaps the biggest well in terms of the size in the Harappan level anywhere. So in case the water from the tank is exhausted, there's always water, in fact, in the deep well. So that water can be drawn. You can see, in fact, on the well, there's a flat stone, and there are groove marks, in fact, on that, maybe the rope marks. So whenever necessary, in fact, the water can be drawn out from this river, and that can be put in the water channel system, and through that, this water can be carried to the different tanks that they have developed. So that type of system was developed by the Harappans, such a unique and such a very advanced technology. In fact, I gave one lecture to the Niti Aayog people, and I said that we should adopt this particular system, Harappan system, of the water harvesting and the water management system. If you adopt that, because for this, we don't need foreign collaboration, because this is our technology. You don't need a lot of funding for this. And this entire construction can be done by the community itself. Each village can develop the system. By adopting this, age-old technology, perhaps, we can transform the desert part into green land. And hopefully, the Niti Aayog people have taken it seriously. But this is how we can. This is the relevance of what we study. This is the relevance of the ancient knowledge system that we study, and that has to be put in use even today. So that is very important. So these are the underground, water channel system. Even they have provided these air ducts at regular intervals. And these air ducts even today in the drainage pattern, this is a very important integral part of the drainage system even today. And we have learned that from the Harappans. So these air ducts are required for two things: to prevent the blockage of the channel system, and also for the maintenance purpose. These are requirement. So that the tradition is continues even today. Then, of course, this is kind of the technology that the Harappans developed. Very advanced technology for making pottery and for firing pottery. And these are big pots. They are perfectly fired. The technology that they develop is very, very sophisticated and advanced. So these are some of the kilns that develop for firing pottery. So these are called the closed kilns, circular closed kilns. The fire is placed at the base, and the pottery that is to be fired is placed in the circular portion, and that is covered. So when the fire is lit at the base, the fire keeps on circulating inside, and the pottery gets evenly fired, and they can raise the temperature up to 1000 degrees centigrade in this particular kiln. So we have a lot of evidence from different sites. And even today, in fact, the same tradition continues. In Haryana particularly, people are making the same kind of pottery even today. If you keep one maybe modern pot and one ancient pot side by side, perhaps you will not be able to identify which one is modern and which one is ancient. There is so much continuity even today. Even the technique of making pottery has not been forgotten. The modern potters are using not so advanced. We are providing, in fact, the technique that the knowledge that we have developed on the basis of the Harappan pottery making. That technique we are supplying to the modern potters so that they can make their products much better, and they will have much better value. So we are helping the society, in fact, through this research also. So this research, this particular tradition is not forgotten. The way the Harappans used to, paint the pottery, the same tradition is being followed even today. This is a small tiny pot from Lothal, and there is a story of thirsty crow, painted on this particular pottery. And this even today, my grandmother used to tell me this particular story. So that how much this is an integral part of our culture for 5,000 years. We are not really forgetting our tradition. So these kind of objects were made by the Harappans, particularly the long carnelian beads. They are such a great demand in West Asia, particularly in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Persian Gulf, that they were exporting so much to these people. In return, they very few things were coming from them. So I always say that the Harappans have looted the Westerns in Western cultures, and they have generated so much wealth. And unlike the Western cultures, they have buried the wealth in fact in huge amount in the royal tombs. Unlike them, we Harappans have not done that, because they knew that once it is buried, it is gone forever. It cannot be used for any developmental purpose. So they have used very judiciously. They just follow the continuity. They follow the tradition only. This wealth was used for the welfare of the common people. That is very, very important. Some of the tradition of some of the what we call as the H carnelian bead. So with the help of Mark Kenoir and other scholars, we have tried to recreate or reconstruct the technology. What kind of H carnelian beads were? What technology was used? So they have used in fact the glue of the local tree, keri, and that they used to put the pattern on the stone beads, particularly on the carnelian stone beads, and then eventually they used to carve the maybe part of the stone That is how this particular tradition has remained permanent even till today. At number of sites, we get the evidence of the manufacturing, because we get the tools, the beads in different stages of manufacture. Some of them are complete, some of them are broken, some of them are unfinished. And the tools that were used, along with that, for polishing, we get the bead polisher. We also get these, maybe drill bits for the perforation. So based on this evidence, we can certainly reconstruct the technology that that was used by the Harappans. And even today in the Khambat region, there are some families in the Khambat region who are still making stone beads by using the same Harappan technology. Same, maybe, flaking technique, same maybe, this polishing technique are being used even today. And, they are doing roaring business all over the world. There's so much demand for the product. So we are encouraging, that more and more people take up this particular craft so that, they also develop their base. So the bronze technology, again, one of the, important metallurgy that was developed by the Harappans, maybe, in this part of the world. They had the very advanced agriculture technique. At the site of Kalibanga, Professor B.P. Lal had excavated these plowshares, the plow marks. You can see in fact in this particular picture. There are plow marks, in one direction which are close to each other, and there are plow marks in the other direction which are, apart from each other. So in the close one, they grow the main crop like wheat and barley, and in the other they grow the secondary crop like maybe horse gram or seed, maybe oil seeds. And that tradition continues even today. The type of agricultural tools used by the Harappans, we have the replica of that, and even today, we are using the same type of, agricultural tools. The medium has changed. The Harappans have used maybe the copper or wooden tools. Today we have switched over to maybe iron and the steel ones. As I mentioned, tandoor chicken is the delicacy which was introduced by the Harappans. And we have, of course, scientifically established this particular technique or this particular tradition that was used by the Harappans. Even the Indian curry, the antiquity of Indian curry goes back to the Harappans. And both, in fact, the Indian curry and the tandoor chicken is so popular all over the world. This is a traditional food, in fact, in the Indian subcontinent. In fact, at Farmana, we found some of the pots in the burials. So we did what is known as the residue analysis. When something is stored in the pot, it forms a small thin layer inside. Even though the pot is maybe clean, the remains will remain permanently. So we scraped that portion and studied the content of the pots, and we found the typical the ingredients of Indian curry, like the turmeric we found, then ginger, the evidence of ginger, garlic, and brinjal. So these are the ingredients of Indian curry. So based on that, we hypothesized that the Indian curry was introduced by the Harappans. Even the food processing was introduced by the Indians. Again, we have the misconception that perhaps this tradition has come from the knowledge has come from the Western world. But actually, it may have gone from here to the Western world. Because we have the earliest evidence of the making of cheese and paneer going back to the Harappan period. And again, some of the perforated jars that we find, they were used for straining maybe these bad maybe yogurt and curd, etc. So we have found the traces of the dairy products, in fact, on these particular pots. So based on that, we can say that this tradition was introduced, or the knowledge system was introduced by the Harappans. The Namaste tradition, again, is almost 5,000 years old, because at the site of Kalibanga, we have found this particular human figure in Namaste tradition. The feeding bottle concept, again, we thought that it has come from the West. But again, we have the earliest evidence of feeding bottle made of terracotta from the Harappan levels. We don't know much about the education system during the Harappan times, but probably they had very evolved education system, because we find the evidence of slate. And when I was a child, in fact, I have used this type of slates, when I was going to school. So probably they had they had a very well system, in fact, well-educative system. Unfortunately, because we are not able to decipher the Harappan scripts, perhaps we are not able to highlight properly on that particular aspect. Then the Harappans, how the Harappans were able to achieve this. We always compare them with the Mesopotamians and Egyptians. And when we look at the evidence from Mesopotamia or Egypt, pyramids from Egypt particularly, and the ziggurats from maybe from Mesopotamia, the general impression that we get is that perhaps these people were much more advanced. Perhaps Harappans were not able to develop this type of monumental architecture that the Westerns have done. But let me tell you that the Harappans were considered to be the best civil engineers in the contemporary world. And had they decided, they could have easily built this type of structures. But they are not done for two reasons. One is that the philosophy was different. As I said earlier, they did everything for the common people. It was done by the people for the people. That was the philosophy of the Harappans. In Mesopotamia, everything was around the royal families, around the monarchical system only. So whatever development happened, pyramids, for example, they were constructed for the royal families, not for the common people. So the entire wealth that was generated, that was vested in this particular creation only. And Harappans thought that this is of no use to the common people, and therefore they have built, instead of pyramids, they have built beautiful, well-planned and clean cities for the common people. So that is the difference. And secondly, the Harappans had some kind of a democratic system. In fact, ICHR has published one book on India, the mother of democracy. And that was the first agenda of the G20 in India. So that work was allotted to ICHR. And I've written an article on the democratic system during the Harappan period. So based on the evidence, we can suggest that Harappans had proper democratic system, sort of panchayat system. And it was run, in fact, maybe cities and towns were run by the panchayat system. Maybe elderly people were running. Whereas in Mesopotamia, we have the evidence of the kings and queens properly, well documented. And they have, reconstructed the entire history, genealogy of the royal family in that region. These are, this is the evidence that we find in Mesopotamia and Egypt. What the Mesopotamians and the Egyptians did, in fact, they are with this monarchical system, and they were very aggressive people. Again, we have the evidence for that because they are the standing army with them. And they used to always in constant conflict with the surrounding kingdoms. They used to defeat them, and the defeated people were brought as slaves. You can see here. And these slaves were used for the construction of pyramids and the ziggurats that they did. Harappans never did that. So some of the, maybe slaves, evidence of the standing army, actually evidence they are found there. Harappans, they developed maybe different, health sciences. The meditation system was developed by the Harappans. We have the evidence for that. And the most important is the yoga tradition. India's best gift to the world is the yoga tradition. And today almost 170 countries are following this particular tradition. And the whole world has realized the importance of the yoga tradition. So this is the science. This is the system the Harappans built, not the standing army or not the conflict with the surrounding countries or surrounding society. Because of this, we had developed completely different system. Then you will wonder, in fact, how the knowledge has survived. Because after the Harappans, we do not find, till 4th century BCE, we do not find any writing system. But India has a very strong, oral tradition. one example I give, when I was excavating in Lothal in Rajasthan, we had one, maybe local people, somebody came to our camp in the morning, and I just inquired, in fact, what you do. So he said that I'm uneducated person. I never went to school. But he said that I read genealogy of the royal family in Udaipur, and he could remember for 800 years, the genealogy of the people for 800 years. So that is the tradition we have. So maybe after the decline of the Harappan civilization, the tradition or the knowledge system was passed on from generation to generation. And finally, when India developed the world's earliest universities like Taxila University, Nalanda University, these are the earliest universities in the world developed in India, not outside India. So there we have the evidence that some of the traditional knowledge system that we had developed, that system was taught, in fact, in these universities. And people, scholars from all over the world, they used to flock to these universities to learn more about the Indian knowledge system. And because the Indian tradition, there is science, in fact, in the Indian culture, which started spreading outside India because of the maybe maritime trade. And the world started adopting the principles of Indian religions. The Hinduism has traveled to Southeast Asia, up to Japan, Jainism, Buddhism. And they found that this religions relevant to them. Therefore, they adopted, they found some maybe science in them. And even today, even though some of the countries like Indonesia has become Islamic country, they still follow the very strong Hindu culture. In fact, the Ramayana tradition is still popular. So our culture was so rich. In fact, what I want to say that it is not, we don't look at that as a part of mere culture, but what is the science behind this? That is important, and the world has realized that. So this was adopted, and finally, who are the people who developed this particular tradition? As I said, that the Harappans are the pioneers. So when it comes to the Harappans, there were two opinions. That somebody said that the Harappans or the Harappan civilization was not developed by the indigenous people. Maybe people from the west came here, maybe Mesopotamians, and they were responsible for the development of the Harappan civilization here. And the larger section of this, of the scholarly world, they believe that maybe this was developed by the indigenous people. But we had no evidence not to prove or disprove this scientifically. So in 2006 itself, in fact, when I excavated the site of Farmana, we excavated a number of burials, 70 burials there. One of the objectives of my research at Farmana was to understand the people. And if you want to understand the people, you need to get the DNA from the skeletal remains. Then only you will understand. So this was the effort that we made. And I have no hesitation in accepting that we miserably failed at Farmana, for this particular research, ancient DNA research, because we were not trained for this particular research, which is very complex and very sophisticated one. And we did not know what kind of precaution we need to take. So we excavated burials, 70 burials at one and the same time. We kept them open for nearly 2 months. And after 2 months, we invited the genetic scientists to extract DNA. So by that time, whatever was remained, it has completely escaped from the skeletal remains. So we did not succeed there at all. But later, after this failure, in fact, I started interacting with the international community who are doing this kind of research. And I came in contact with the scientists from Seoul National University in Korea. Perhaps the Seoul National University, the medical college in Seoul National University has perhaps the finest forensic science departments. So they suggested that you need to take proper precaution, and that we adopted that at the site of Rakhigarhi. Also, Rakhigarhi has the perhaps one of the largest cemeteries, Harappan cemeteries. So they said that you have to take, because DNA is very sensitive, and they said that you have to take proper precaution, make sure that there is no contamination. Because when we excavate, our DNA can get into Harappan DNA easily. And that time, when we started this research in 2010-11, that time the DNA science was not highly developed, in fact. Now it is possible to separate modern DNA and ancient DNA easily now, but not that time. So they say that take proper precaution, use maybe this type of PP kit, hand gloves, maybe this mask, and proper protection. So we took that precaution. Then they suggested that target one burial at a time. Don't excavate many burials at a time. So excavate the burial, document it, and transport the sample immediately to the laboratory. That's what we did, in fact, here. And all the burials were excavated by following this particular precaution. Very strict precaution we took. But in spite of this, when we found DNA in one skeletal remain, I'm coming to that part, we found that when we started analyzing, we found the elements of East Asian population in the Harappan population. There was no way, because Harappans never had contact with East Asia, China, Japan, Korea. So how come that the DNA of the East Asian population is found, small percentage of DNA is found in the Harappan population? And then we started investigating, and we found that one of our students was from Korea, was excavating in the burial. And in spite of taking all the precaution, his DNA got into Harappan DNA. It's so sensitive. So we took this precaution. We excavated the burials. While packing the samples, we took the same precaution. When the samples were brought to our Deccan College lab, we cleaned them by taking the same precaution, and then of course the samples were sent to CCMB for extraction. The condition is not good, conducive for the preservation of organic matter in the Indian subcontinent overall. It's more humid, very dry, which is not good for this condition. And the soil is more acidic. Because of that, the condition of the preservation is very, very bad. And therefore, we excavated 60 burials. We did not find DNA in 59 burials. And this was the last skeletal remain, the last Harappan lady that came to our rescue. We always say that it's a lady luck for us. So this particular skeletal remain of a lady around 30 to 35 years old, Harappan lady, probably from a slightly upper class, based on the burial goods that we find. We don't find so many burial goods around the common burials. In few only, which have got maybe slightly higher status. And she was very beautiful because her features are very sharp, like a typical Haryana woman. So we found DNA from this particular skeletal remain. So after we published that paper, see, we took all kinds of scientific research that is required. We did the anthropological research. We published that. We did a CT scanning, which is required for the 3D reconstruction. That is called craniofacial reconstruction. Then we also did the paleoparasitology. The Koreans had succeeded. They had retrieved some parasite eggs from the ancient burials, from the cemeteries. And based on the parasite eggs, they were able to identify the DNA of the people. In all of us, in our body, even today, there is a formation of parasite eggs in our body because of maybe contaminated water, contaminated food. And when we die, the body disintegrates, but the parasitic eggs remain permanent. So we also wanted to find whether we are getting in the parasite eggs, in fact, in the Harappan burials. We did not succeed because the time period is very long. And then we did the sampling for this scientific analysis, the result of which I mentioned briefly, the reconstruction of the food habit of the people, dietary habit of the people. And then, of course, the samples were used for ancient DNA. So this is the paper that we published. And the title of this paper itself suggests that the Iranians have not contributed to the development of our ancestry, nor the steppe population. Clearly. So what we did, in fact, let me tell you the story of our research. The whole research was planned by the Indians only. We wanted to demonstrate that we are capable of undertaking this type of breakthrough research also. We are capable of doing that. And we have the capacity. So the whole research was developed, maybe the excavation was done by the Indian archaeologists. The DNA extraction was done by the scientists in CCMB. We had done the sequencing also, and also interpretation. And by 2015 we were ready to publish the paper. But then I recall, the mindset of the Westerners, because I told you the story about the Birana. The dates, early dates were not accepted by and they started raising, number of doubts. And I realized that, these scholars will, once it is published, because this is a very important research that we have initiated, they will start, making all this noise. And they will say that, intentionally they will say that, you have not done this analysis or that analysis. So what we did, we made 3 samples of the samples that we had. 3 libraries of the samples we made. So one we had analyzed, one we gave to Korean scientists, and one we gave to the Harvard Medical School, which has got the biggest ancient DNA lab. And we told that, only you do cross-checking for us. They took some time, but we got the results from both of them, from both the laboratories, which were exactly complementary to what we had achieved. And then, with the help of, we also included them, in fact, in the, publication. And we published that paper in 2019. 2 comments immediately rose, in fact, after that. Because there was a BJP government. So somebody started saying that, to please the government, we have manipulated our data and published the way the government wants. Which is not true, in fact, because the academicians will never do that. And secondly, the data that we have published, it is all in public domain. Anybody can check at any time. It is available to anyone. The second comment, which is genuine, of course, we also could have raised the same comment, that how on the basis of one skeletal remain, we can generalize. That is a genuine question. We need more samples. But those who understand the population genomics, even one sample is very important and enough, in fact, to make generalization. It is like testing rice. Whether rice is cooked or not, we pick up 1 grain of the rice, not each and every grain. So DNA is like that. So what we found is that, we found a very distinct genes in the Harappan population. We call them as ancient ancestral South. Earlier it was called South Indians. But now we have broadened that term to South Asians now. So ancient ancestral South Asian genes we have, which are different from the Iranians, different from the steppe population, different from the Western population. So we developed that, in fact. And in the genomics, we can also use the genomic chronology to find out the roots of this genetic history. So it stretched back to almost 10,000 BCE. When we started doing that, genetic chronology, it took us back to 10,000 BCE. So there were hunter-gatherers that time, in 10,000 BCE. And maybe somewhere on the border of Iran and Afghanistan, the hunter-gatherers split in 2 groups. One group came to South Asia. You can see this, diagram. And one group went to Iran. So the group which went to Iran, they started mixing up with the Anatolian population. And the group which came to South Asia, their genes started getting mutated into a very separate and distinct genes. Ancient ancestral South Asian. So slowly their genes were mutated, became a very distinct South Asian. The same genes came to impact, in the Harappan population. And it has continued till the modern times. We analyzed nearly 3,500 modern samples, included all the groups, 140 groups in South Asia. And we found that, there is a very strong indication. We are not established, but we are close to that. We are getting a very strong, indication that most of us, from Andaman Nicobar to Ladakh and Kashmir, and from Afghanistan to up to the border of Northeast at least, because we have not gone beyond that yet, all of us carry 20 to 25% Harappan genes. And the rest are maybe 3% are Iranians, 2% are maybe Europeans, 4% Central Asians, like that, because we were interacting with population from all over the world. And because of the interaction, a lot of mixing was also happening. But when we have 20 to 25% genes of one group, that means we are descendants of that particular group. So no matter what religion we follow, what caste and creed we follow, all of us carry the Harappan ancestry. We are getting very strong and very strong indication for this. So this is the outcome of this of our research. Very. And then of course in the same year, on the left hand corner you can see a small memento. So there is a big organization called International Conference on Genomics, a very big organization. And they had identified 9 breakthrough researches in the world in this particular field. And Rakhigarhi research was on top of that. So this means that the scientific community all over the world, they have accepted our research. And this is a very important research demonstrating that we are capable, Indians are capable of undertaking this type of research. So this is what we have done in fact at the site of Rakhigarhi. Secondly, we always think that the Aryans have come from outside, from Central Asia to Iran, from Iran to India, when we do not know. And they brought maybe Vedic culture with them here. What we did, there is a site called Gonur in Turkmenistan, and there is a site called Shari Sokta in Iran. Both the sites are contemporary. They were excavated by the local scholars, archaeologists. They found a lot of Harappan material in those sites because they are contemporary to the Harappans, indicating that Harappans had contact with them. Because of contact, only these things will go there, maybe trade contact. Also, somebody had done DNA of those people also. So we used that data and compared with the Harappan or Rakhigarhi data. What we found that the elements, very small elements of the Harappan DNA is found present in fact in the DNA of the Gonur population and Shari Sokta population, but not their genes in fact in the Harappan population. That means the Harappans started going out first, and then there is a reciprocal movement happening after that. Maybe people started coming from that. So that was happening at some stage, maybe after 2000 BCE. So if at all, we don't believe that there were Aryans and Dravidians. That is a divide which was created intentionally by the colonial scientists and the historians. But if at all anybody believes that there were Aryans, then we are the Aryans because we started going out first and started spreading our cultural elements. So that is that is also one of the important highlights of our research that we did. And then you have traced, in fact, how that genes have started spreading, or how the Harappan, genomes started spreading in South Asia. So we have the earliest evidence in the northwest part of India, 7000 BCE. From there, we have, maybe people started moving towards some group of people towards Mid-Ganga basin, where there's a site called Lavura Deva, excavated by this UP State Archaeology. 6000 BCE, the earliest evidence of agriculture there. Then I excavated the site of Gilund and Lothal in Mewat region of Rajasthan. Around 4500 BCE, we have the evidence of the beginning of agriculture there. So maybe from northwest to Ganga basin, from Ganga to maybe Mewat region, and then by 3000 BCE, most of the Harappan elements started spreading all over India up to Tamil Nadu. So that is how the cultural elements have started spreading from Harappan region to all over South Asia, and that is the reason that we follow even today. The typical Harappan knowledge system and tradition even today, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, and that is, scientifically, we are very close to the establishment of this particular hypothesis also. So this is how you can get the chronology from this. And we have also demonstrated how the cultural elements are also moving along with the people. From northwest to Ganga, from Ganga to Mewat, from Mewat to other parts of Indian subcontinent. Except the Tibeto-Burman, all the other groups, they have the same origin, in fact, the linguistic groups. Then you will wonder, why there is so much diversity in the complexion of the people. So the complexity has nothing to do with the genomes or DNA at all. It is not based on this particular DNA at all. The complexities or the complexion is based on the geography of the region, the climate of the region, food habit of the people, and how much mixing was happening with the population outside the world. For example, people from the northern part, they are more mixing from Central Asia, Iran. Because of that, they look similar to the Iranians. Whereas the southern Indian population has more mixing with Africa and the Southeast Asia. Because of that, the look is different, complexion is different. So it has nothing to do with the genomes or the DNA. So all of us carry more or less the same DNA, and we were united in trying for last almost 5,000 years. And last part, that how the Harappan people look like, because this is again for the first time we have done this type of research. We have shown in fact the complexion of the Harappan people. We have done first stage of the reconstruction. The next stage is very complicated. For first stage, we have spent nearly 3 crores. So huge funding is required for this. And for the next, now if you want to identify maybe the color of the skin, color of the eyes, color of the hair, then it is very expensive. Maybe we are looking for the funding for that. Maybe almost 8 to 10 crores funding is required for that. But at least from this particular research, so we need this type of complete skeletal remains. And we fortunately found some complete skeletal remains. This is a boy, Harappan boy, 18 to 19 years old. And this is the Harappan woman, maybe around 40 to 45 years old Harappan woman. And we have done the reconstruction of the facial features or the 3D reconstruction of these. Scientifically, it is called craniofacial reconstruction. So for this, we need two kinds of sets of data. One is that we need the data of the matrix, the measurement of the bones. So that we took, when we were excavating these remains, we have the data with us. And we also need the inner anatomical data, which we generated through this CT scanning of the skeletal remains. And this was fed in the computer. We have developed a special program for this. So slowly, the reconstruction was done. Most scientific, way of reconstructing the facial features of the ancient people. And we have shown that, these Harappans and the modern people, there's so much similarity. So here, we have continuity we have 3 sets of evidences here. what is the cultural evidence? Now there's a continuity from Harappan till today. We have continuity in the genetic history and also continuity in the complexion of the people also. So based on that, we can simply say that we are inheriting at least 5,000 years of maybe Indian history, and we feel proud about that. So finally, you'll ask us then, how come we have such a rich tradition, a rich knowledge system? How come we have forgotten our system, in fact, education system? And the colonial historians, the colonial maybe educationalists who formulated the British India education policy, they have to say something like this. Macaulay, who was the architect of the British India education policy, he said that give the impression to the Indians, because Indian culture is so rich, we cannot defeat them. Their education system is so rich, their values are very rich, but give them the impression that English language is superior to them and the English culture is superior to them. Once we give the impression to them, they will develop that mentality, and we will succeed in ruling this particular country. That is how they brushed aside our very strong, very robust education system, and they impose upon us their education system, which has no place for thinking at all. Rote learning, in fact, is called rote learning. So that is what we followed. They prepared us only for this from the point of view of examination, not from the point of view of knowledge. And they have succeeded till today. Our mindset is colonized. We are not really come out of that. When somebody speaks good English, we always get the impression that this person is knowledgeable. And so because of the mindset that we have developed, and Britishers have succeeded even after 80 years of independence, we have not come out of this particular mindset. So it is our responsibility that now we decolonize the minds of the young population now. And then only, in a true sense, we will succeed in doing what we want to do. And basically, when you look at our past, it gives the impression, we have the evidence that we were certainly rich, because of which the whole world was attracted to us. And they have tried to loot us from time to time, but still we stood tall. Every time they tried to do that with us. So friends, thank you very much. I'm again grateful to Nagarajji for inviting me here. And such a pleasure talking to all of you. Thank you very much.